Let me ask you something that most doctors never say out loud in an exam room. What if the most dangerous 2 minutes of your day aren't the ones you spend stressed or rushing or eating something you shouldn't, but the 2 minutes right after you wake up? And what if flipping that around, turning those same 2 minutes into something intentional and specific, could fundamentally change what happens inside your heart over the next decade? I know that sounds bold, but I want to walk you through exactly why I believe this, and more importantly, why the science supports it in ways that might genuinely surprise you. My name is Dr. William Lee. I'm a physician and scientist, and I've spent much of my career studying how the body heals itself from the inside out. My work has taken me through cancer research, vascular biology, and the science of how the foods we eat and the habits we keep either accelerate disease or prevent it. And what I'm going to share with you today sits at the intersection of all of that. This is about your heart. Specifically, it's about what happens to the heart after 60 and why that window of life is both more vulnerable and more responsive than most people realize. If you've ever had a parent or grandparent affected by heart disease, or if you're navigating your own cardiovascular health right now, I want you to stay with me through this entire conversation, because what I'm about to explain could genuinely matter to you. And if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to subscribe to this channel, BioSecrets. We cover science-based health content that goes deeper than the headlines, and there's a lot more coming that you won't want to miss. Now, let me start by challenging something most people believe about heart attacks. Most people think a heart attack is an event, something that happens suddenly without warning, often to someone who seemed perfectly fine. And while it's true that the clinical moment, the chest pain, the collapse can feel sudden, the biology behind it is anything but. A heart attack is not an event. It is the final chapter of a very long story, and that story almost always begins quietly, years or even decades earlier, in the walls of your arteries. Here's why this matters so much after 60. By the time most people reach their 60s, that story is already well underway, not necessarily in a catastrophic way, but in a slow, cumulative way that has been building silently. The great news, and this is where the science gets genuinely exciting, is that the body's arteries are not fixed structures. They are living, breathing, responsive tissue, and they can be influenced, improved, and in many cases, partially reversed from damage through the right inputs at the right times, including what you do in the first 2 minutes of your morning. Let me explain the biology first, because once you understand what's actually happening inside your cardiovascular system, everything else clicks into place. Your arteries are lined with a single continuous layer of cells called the endothelium. I want you to picture this layer like the inner coating of a garden hose. It's incredibly thin, just one cell thick, but it does an extraordinary amount of work. The endothelium controls blood flow, regulates blood pressure, prevents dangerous clots from forming, and produces a molecule called nitric oxide that acts like a natural signal telling your blood vessels to relax and open wide. When your endothelium is healthy, your blood moves freely, your heart doesn't have to work as hard, and your risk of cardiovascular disease drops dramatically. But here's what happens over time, especially after 60. The endothelium begins to experience what scientists call endothelial dysfunction. The cells become less efficient at producing nitric oxide. Inflammation quietly takes hold inside the arterial walls. Cholesterol and other particles, particularly LDL cholesterol, begin infiltrating those walls in areas where the lining has been weakened. The immune system responds, sending in cells that accumulate into what we call plaques, and over years, those plaques grow, harden, and narrow the arteries. This is atherosclerosis, and it is the direct cause of most heart attacks. Now, the reason I bring up nitric oxide specifically is because this molecule is central to everything we're going to talk about today. Nitric oxide is produced primarily by the endothelium, but it's also produced through a completely separate pathway involving bacteria in your mouth and the foods you eat. And here's what's remarkable. Nitric oxide production declines significantly with age. By the time someone reaches their 60s or 70s, their body may be producing less than half the nitric oxide it produced in their 30s. Less nitric oxide means stiffer blood vessels, higher blood pressure, reduced blood flow to the heart muscle itself, and a sharply elevated risk of cardiac events. So when I talk about what you do in the first 2 minutes of your morning, I'm talking about specific behaviors that directly and measurably influence nitric oxide production and endothelial function starting from the moment you open your eyes. The first thing is something that almost no one thinks about in the context of heart health, and it involves your mouth. Before you do anything else in the morning, before you drink coffee, before you eat, before you even reach for your phone, the single most impactful thing you can do for your cardiovascular system is to rinse your mouth with cold water and then hydrate your body. Let me explain why this is more important than it sounds. During sleep, your oral microbiome, the community of bacteria living in your mouth, is working in a very particular way. Some of these bacteria are nitrate-reducing bacteria, meaning they convert dietary nitrates from the foods you've eaten into nitrites, which the body then converts into nitric oxide. This process is genuinely important for your vascular health. But here's the problem. A large percentage of Americans begin their morning by immediately using antibacterial mouthwash. Research published in cardiovascular and oral health journals has shown that people who use antibacterial mouthwash twice daily have measurably higher blood pressure and lower nitric oxide availability compared to those who don't. Why? Because that mouthwash destroys the very bacteria responsible for helping your body make nitric oxide. I'm not saying never brush your teeth. Oral hygiene matters enormously, but the timing of antibacterial mouthwash, especially in the morning before breakfast, may be quietly undermining your cardiovascular health in a way your doctor has likely never mentioned. So step 1 of your 2-minute morning practice is this. Rinse with plain cold water, not antibacterial mouthwash, and then immediately drink a full glass of water, at least 12 ounces. Here's what this does biologically. Overnight, your body has gone 6 to 8 or more hours without hydration. Blood viscosity, how thick your blood is, increases during sleep. Thicker blood is harder to pump, creates more shear stress on arterial walls, and elevates the risk of clot formation in the morning hours. There's a well-documented phenomenon in cardiology called the morning surge, where blood pressure spikes in the early hours after waking and the risk of heart attack and stroke is statistically highest. Rehydrating immediately upon waking helps thin the blood, supports healthy circulation, and begins to counteract that morning pressure surge before it gains momentum. This is 2 minutes, it is free, and it is grounded in real cardiovascular science. Now let me take you to the second piece of this morning practice, because this one surprised even me when I first encountered the research behind it. Within the first 2 minutes of your morning, or as close to waking as possible, I want you to stand up and take 10 deep, slow, deliberate breaths, not rushed, not shallow, full diaphragmatic breaths where your belly expands, not just your chest. Inhale slowly for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale slowly for 6, 10 cycles. That's roughly 90 seconds. Here's what's happening in your body during this. When you sleep, your autonomic nervous system, the system that controls heart rate, blood pressure, and vascular tone, is in a particular state. As you transition from sleep to waking, the sympathetic branch of that system, your fight or flight system, becomes activated. This is natural and necessary. But in people with cardiovascular risk factors, this sympathetic activation can be abrupt and excessive, causing a rapid spike in heart rate and blood pressure that stresses the arterial walls, particularly in arteries that already have some degree of plaque. Slow, controlled breathing, what scientists call slow-paced breathing or diaphragmatic breathing, directly activates the vagus nerve, which is the main conduit of your parasympathetic nervous system. Your parasympathetic system is essentially the brake on your cardiovascular engine, activating it gently and deliberately in the first moments of your day, blunts that morning sympathetic surge, lowers cortisol levels early in the day, and has been shown in clinical research to improve heart rate variability, which is one of the strongest predictors of cardiovascular health and longevity that we currently have. Heart rate variability, or HRV, is a measure of how adaptable your heart is, how well it can adjust its rhythm in response to changing demands. Low HRV is associated with increased risk of arrhythmia, heart failure, and sudden cardiac events. High HRV is associated with a resilient, well-regulated cardiovascular system, and tense low. Breaths in the morning is one of the simplest, most accessible tools for nudging that number in the right direction consistently, day after day. I want to take a moment here and step back because I realize I've just described something that sounds almost too simple. 2 minutes, rinse with water, drink a glass of water, breathe slowly, and I understand why your mind might push back and say, can this really matter? Let me reframe it this way. The heart attack doesn't happen in a day. The cardiovascular disease that leads to it builds over years through thousands of small inputs, some damaging, some protective. The morning hours specifically are a physiologically vulnerable window for the cardiovascular system. What you do consistently in that window, repeated hundreds and thousands of times over months and years, accumulates into a measurable biological outcome. The science isn't asking you to believe in magic. It's asking you to understand that small, consistent, targeted behaviors in the right biological window create significant downstream effects. And the morning is that window. Now I want to expand the conversation because while those 2 minutes are the foundation, there's a broader picture of heart protection after 60 that I want to make sure you understand, because the science here is genuinely hopeful, and that hope is backed by evidence, not wishful thinking. One of the most underappreciated truths in cardiovascular medicine is that the endothelium can regenerate. It does this through a process involving circulating stem cells called endothelial progenitor cells. These cells are released from the bone marrow and travel through the bloodstream, repairing damaged sections of the arterial Lining. Think of them like a maintenance crew constantly scanning for cracks in the endothelium and patching them up. In young, healthy people, this repair system works efficiently. But by the time someone is in their 60s, the number of circulating endothelial progenitor cells has often declined significantly, and the rate of damage can begin to outpace the rate of repair. But here's what's remarkable. Research has shown that specific lifestyle behaviors, exercise, particular foods, and even stress reduction can measurably increase the number of these circulating repair cells. Your body hasn't given up on its own arteries, it just needs the right signals. Let's talk about food, because this is where some of the most powerful and most overlooked cardiovascular science lives. The first food category I want to highlight is dietary nitrates. These are naturally occurring compounds found in specific vegetables, dark leafy greens like arugula, spinach, beet greens, Swiss chard, and especially beets themselves. When you eat these foods, the nitrate-reducing bacteria in your mouth and gut convert those nitrates into nitric oxide through the same pathway I described earlier. This is why what you do with your oral microbiome in the morning, not destroying it with harsh antibacterial rinses, matters so much. Those bacteria are your nitric oxide factory. Research has consistently shown that people who consume higher amounts of dietary nitrates have lower resting blood pressure, more flexible arteries, and better exercise tolerance in the heart. One study found that drinking a single serving of beet juice lowered blood pressure by an average of 4 to 5 points within hours. That's a clinically significant reduction, comparable in some cases to a low-dose antihypertensive medication achieved through food. If you want to make this practical, I recommend adding dark leafy greens to your breakfast, your lunch, or both, a handful of arugula in your eggs, some spinach in a morning smoothie, beet-based salads with lunch. These aren't exotic or expensive foods. They're accessible, and their effect on your nitric oxide system, and therefore, your arterial health, is real and measurable. The second food group I want to highlight is one that surprises people every time I bring it up. Fermented foods, things like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and miso. The connection to heart health here runs through the gut microbiome. The trillions of bacteria living in your intestinal tract produce metabolites that influence inflammation throughout the body, including inside your arteries. A disrupted gut microbiome, what we call dysbiosis, is now recognized as a genuine cardiovascular risk factor. Certain gut bacteria produce a compound called TMAO, which has been linked to accelerated atherosclerosis and increased heart attack risk. A healthy, diverse microbiome, supported by fermented foods and fiber, shifts the balance away from those harmful pathways. Clinical research has found associations between regular consumption of fermented dairy, particularly yogurt, and reduced risk of cardiovascular disease. This isn't a fringe idea, it's now part of mainstream nutritional cardiovascular research. The third food I want to mention is one you've likely heard about, but perhaps not for the right reasons. Dark chocolate, specifically cacao, with at least 70% cocoa content, contains compounds called flavanols that have a direct, measurable effect on endothelial function. Multiple clinical trials have demonstrated that regular consumption of high cacao dark chocolate improves the ability of arteries to dilate, reduces blood pressure, decreases LDL oxidation, and increases circulating endothelial progenitor cells, those repair cells I mentioned earlier. 1 to 2 small squares per day of genuinely dark, minimally processed chocolate is not an indulgence. In the right quantity, it is a cardiovascular medicine. And then there's olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the most thoroughly researched foods in cardiovascular science. The Predamid trial, one of the largest dietary intervention studies ever conducted, found that people who consumed a Mediterranean diet enriched with extra virgin olive oil had a 30% reduction in major cardiovascular events compared to a control group. The key compounds in extra virgin olive oil, oleocanthal, oleic acid, and various polyphenols, reduce LDL oxidation, suppress arterial inflammation, and protect the endothelium at a cellular level. This is not a correlation in epidemiological data. This was a randomized trial. With hard clinical endpoints, use it generously on vegetables, in cooking, on bread. Make it a daily staple. Now, I want to address something that often gets overlooked in conversations about heart health after 60, and that's sleep. Not just the duration of sleep, but the quality and the specific cardiovascular processes that happen during it. During deep sleep, the slow wave stages, your blood pressure drops, your heart rate slows, and your body enters what's called a nocturnal dip. This dip is physiologically important. It gives your cardiovascular system a period of genuine rest and repair. People who don't experience this nocturnal dip, often because of sleep apnea, poor sleep quality, or disrupted sleep schedules, have significantly elevated cardiovascular risk. In fact, non-dipping blood pressure is considered an independent risk factor for heart attack and stroke. If you're over 60 and you snore heavily, wake up tired despite adequate sleep, or have been told you stop breathing during sleep, please take that seriously. Obstructive sleep apnea is vastly undertreated in older adults, and it is placing extraordinary strain on the heart every single night, treating it often through relatively simple means can dramatically reduce cardiovascular risk. Beyond apnea, simple sleep hygiene practices consistent sleep and wake times, keeping your bedroom cool and dark, avoiding screens in the hour before bed support that critical nocturnal dip and allow the cardiovascular system to repair and reset in the way it's designed to do. There's one more area I want to cover before we bring this all together, and it connects back to something deeply biological that most people don't associate with heart health at all: your sense of purpose. This sounds philosophical, but the science is compelling and specific. Research from the Rush University Medical Center followed older adults and found that those with a higher sense of purpose in life had significantly lower risk of heart attack, stroke, and cardiovascular death. Purpose, the feeling that your days have direction. And meaning reduces chronic cortisol levels, decreases systemic inflammation, improves sleep quality, and supports the kind of parasympathetic nervous system tone that protects the heart. These are not vague or speculative connections. They are biological pathways with measurable endpoints. I'm raising this because after 60, some people experience a quiet contraction of their world: retirement, loss of social roles, shifts in relationships, and this matters for the heart in ways that go far beyond the emotional. If you're in that season of life and feeling a lack of direction or connection, please don't underestimate what that's doing to your physiology. Volunteering, mentoring, creative engagement, deep social relationships, these aren't just good for your mood. They are literally good for your arteries. Let me now bring everything together because I want to leave you with a clear and empowering picture. Your heart after 60 is not a system in inevitable decline. It is a system that is extraordinarily responsive to the signals you give it. Every morning you have a 2-minute window, a biologically significant window, where your choices either amplify cardiovascular stress or diffuse it. Rinsing with water instead of antibacterial. Mouthwash preserves the oral bacteria that help your body make nitric oxide. Drinking a full glass of water immediately reduces blood viscosity during the highest risk hours of the morning. Taking 10 slow, deliberate diaphragmatic breaths activates your vagus nerve, lowers your morning cortisol surge, and trains your heart rate variability toward resilience. These are not placebo effects. They are mechanisms. They are biology, and they are available to you right now for free starting tomorrow morning. Beyond those 2 minutes, your food choices: dietary nitrates from leafy greens and beets, fermented foods for your gut and microbiome, high cacao dark chocolate for endothelial function, extra virgin olive oil for its proven anti-inflammatory and arterial protective effects, are among the most powerful cardiovascular medicines available to you. They don't require a prescription. They require awareness and consistency. Your sleep matters more than most people appreciate after 60. Your sense of purpose and social connection have a direct, measurable impact on your arterial health and your endothelium. That single critical layer of cells lining every artery in your body is not a passive victim of aging. It is a living, regenerating system that responds to the right inputs. The story of a heart attack is written slowly, but so is the story of a healthy, resilient, long-beating heart, and you have far more authorship over that story than you may have been led to believe. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me, what is one change from today's conversation that you're going to start tomorrow morning? Whether it's rinsing with water instead of mouthwash, drinking that first glass of water right away, or committing to those 10 slow breaths, write it down below. Writing it out makes it real. And I genuinely read your responses because understanding what resonates with this community helps me bring you more of the science that matters to your life. If someone you love is over 60, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a partner, please share this with them. Not because they need to be alarmed, but because this kind of information, practical and grounded and truly actionable, can genuinely change what their next decade looks like. Most people never hear this from their doctors. Simply because of time constraints, this is your chance to fill that gap for someone you care about. And if you haven't subscribed to Bio Secrets yet, I'd really encourage you to do that now. We are committed to bringing you science that is accurate, accessible, and genuinely useful, not trends, not hype, not fear, just the biology of how your body works and how to work with it. Hit subscribe and make sure you turn on notifications so you don't miss what we have coming next. Your heart has been working for you every single second of your life without asking for anything in return. It's not too late, and it's never too late to start working back.